Hey guys, my name is Connor Thorpe. I'm going to be showing you guys how to do some plastic recycling using a Filament EX6 extruder and then a fan and a spooler. So first things first, each one of these pieces has their own plug. Obviously plug them in before and after use just in case any power outages. The first thing I do is just turn on each of the knobs. So the extruder has a flip, the fan has a button, and then the extruder or the spooler has a traverse and a drive on and off switch. So the first thing to do is to set your temperatures. For the EX6, you have 4 temperature controllers, one in the feed, one in the back, the middle, and the front. You can set them for whatever material you're using. For this, we're going to be using PLA. And then we also have fans at each of these temperature zones, making sure to cool the extruder and not overheat. The first thing I'll do is I always use some of this purge pellets to purge out the extruder to get rid of any old contaminants that has been in the extruder. And then I will pour some material into the hopper with the hopper shut. So this EX6 actually has a little slide that you can shut the hopper. That way the material falls in nice and evenly. And I never put too much material in the hopper at once, just in case it does clog or there's an issue with the extruder. That way you don't have too much material that you have to get out. And then once you have the material in there and everything is up to temp, you can start the extruder. So there's a stop and a start button. So press start and a little speed knob. And then once the screw in the extruder is moving, you can let the material down into the screw. And then we'll wait about 5 or so minutes until it pushes through the entire barrel, and then it'll come out this edge, and we'll slowly start spooling it and cooling it under this fan. One other cool thing we have here is a diameter, like an automatic diameter measure of the filament. So as we're spooling, we can constantly be measuring the diameter and changing the speed of the spooler to make sure we have the ideal diameter of the filament for printing. Another interesting thing about this extruder is we have a current and a voltage measure, which basically just shows you how hard the machine is working. So if all of a sudden your voltage ramps up, then you have a clog or some sort of issue in the extruder, and then you can easily see that and stop the machine. So what I like to do is I always run it at a consistent 20 volts. That way you don't have to worry too much about it running into any issues and overheating or anything. So about 3 more minutes and it should be coming out of the other side. So when I grab the filament, it's going to be extremely hot because it's melting. So I'm going to use some tweezers just to help and obviously some nice gloves to make sure I don't burn my hands. And sometimes if you don't have a really clean nozzle, you'll see some old filament kind of hanging on the side. Make sure to pick that out, because if you don't, then it'll start to grab your melted filament and then basically ruin the beginning of your filament, which is a really common issue I've run into. So this barrel is about twice as long as our old extruder's barrel. So that's why it takes so much longer to get the material out. But it's good because then we're heating it more evenly and making sure everything's melted and that the filament's uniform and homogeneous. There we go. So you can see a little purge pellet bubble that popped out the beginning. And that's just from the old purge pellets that I just used. One second. Just gonna grab some scissors. So you can see there's one of those little pieces of filament I was telling you about that's kind of sticking out the bottom. So make sure to just pull that off so it doesn't ruin any further filament. And make sure it's just away from that nozzle center. You can see it's causing some issues. And then once I get a decent filament, even if it's really a large diameter, it doesn't matter. I'll start to cool it and run it through the magnets over the fan. And as I'm doing that, I'll just make sure I keep cleaning that nozzle. And then once the diameter gets a little bit better and more consistent, then I'll just clip from this side. That way, all the filament's already running through the magnet. And usually the first few feet of your filament will be pretty bad compared to the rest, just because it's still cleaning out a lot of the contaminants in there. So I usually like to trash the first few feet, which is what I'm doing here, until I get good filament. Still getting some on the side. I'm starting to get a little bit better. And then I will start running it through the diameter onto the spool. And while that's going, since I still don't have good enough filament, I'm not going to put it through the traverse motor yet. I'm just going to keep cleaning the side of the nozzle. Now it looks a lot better. So now I'm going to start spooling it up. We're still a little high on the diameter. We're about 2 millimeters or so. And we want it to be about 1.75. There's a little bit of leeway, anywhere from about 1.67 to 1.83. I consider to be printable filament. 1.75 is the ideal diameter. So I like to just monitor this diameter meter. And once I get a little bit consistent, then I'll start to actually spool it, because I want the full spool to be printable. I don't want to have to search through the spool for printable parts and fill them up. So at about 1.68, when I put it on the spool, this is actually one of the hard parts. The spool has a couple holes in it, and I like to use those to stick the filament through and kind of at an angle to make it stick. And then you can turn on your traverse motor, which gets it moving horizontally. And that way you can get an evenly filled spool from left to right. Always want to make sure you have enough material in the hopper. Let it run a little low. So I'm going to speed it up to counteract it. If your diameter is too large, then just turn your job up. If it's too small, then turn your drive down a bunch. It is really sensitive though, so when you start switching it, like you'll notice it 45 to a minute later. So if you can be sitting here like trying to ram it up and you're not seeing it, but back here is where it's actually happening. So that's one thing that's kind of confusing, but that should help. So the hardest part is just getting it started. Once it's started, then it's a lot easier to manage. Then it's just watching it basically and hitting a couple knobs. But we're pretty much out on that. And just make sure that the extruder and the speed's off. The temperature should still be on. Strip the metal. So make sure the temperature is still up, and then you can loosen the nozzle. And then just clean out the inside while it's still pretty liquidy, pretty melted. And try and just get as much of the material out. That way it doesn't cause any issues when you try and re-put on the nozzle. And then once it's off, I just turn it up and try and just squeeze everything else out. And then I'll run the purge pellets through right after that.